Hello everyone, and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
The Death of Stalin.
Well, before we start, I just kind of want to say how outraged I was by the projection.
Okay,
Yeah, I've calmed down a bit now. Yeah, you might be surprised to see, but I have calmed down. But I was incandescent. I mean, the first 15 minutes of the film were out of focus. You know, we screamed out, no response. There was clearly no projector at all in the booth. You know, then you went down.
Well, I went down before even the first shot of the film.
Yeah.
Because I'd seen it, because it was out of focus in the trailers and everything.
Then nothing was done. Then I went down, and they said they would restart the film, which is what they should have done. And then for 5 minutes afterwards, stewing in the seat, like really just kind of completely enraged. I mean, I couldn't focus on the film because I was just so enraged by such little care, you know, for what they were showing. Yes. Really. And the waste of all the customers' time. You know, it's not easy to get to the cinema. It's expensive, and they're not even like showing it in focus. And then once they realize that it's not in focus, they don't even restart the film. So you feel, what the fuck have you purchased then? And why don't they care? Right? And this is at a time when everyone's saying, oh, cinemas, you know, they're losing customers. People are losing the habit of going to the movies. Well, no fucking wonder. I mean, it's just outrageous, really. So anyway, there's my rant. But I think it also has a bit of repercussions because, you know, how can you talk about a film in which you've missed the first 15 minutes? And actually, something delicate like a comedy, right? Which you know, it has to set up a tone. How do you go into this mood for comedy when you've been incandescent with rage for 15 minutes? That was my challenge, right? So perhaps kind of credit to the film that, you know, the rest of what we saw actually won you over instantly. It's really great. I hope fucking Cineworld hears this. It was Cineworld, Birmingham Broad Street, 1250 screening.
1210.
1210. Okay, that's out of the way now.
Let's talk about the film.
Okay, so...
We saw The Death of Stalin, eventually, which is an Armando Iannucci film.
Right.
Which I was looking forward to. It seemed to come out of sort of nowhere because I was expecting... I'd heard after, he'd done The Thick of It, he'd done In the Loop, and he'd done Veep. And I heard the next thing he was working on was going to be this robot comedy where robots have... AI has advanced to the point where it's intelligent enough to take over the world. Mm. But robot bodies are still, you know, terrible, like now. They fall over and stuff. And yet they decide that now is the time to strike. Mm. That's what I'd heard the next film was going to be, which is a great idea. Then this Death of Stalin comes out of nowhere. So it's this comedy based on the Death of Stalin in, was it 1953?
Yes.
And kind of all the politicians who surround him arguing, scrambling for power, making deals, and it follows very much his The Thick of It and In the Loop and Veep style of filmmaking, which is handheld, snatched conversations, people talking over each other. I imagine there's a good degree of improvisation like there is in the other projects. So yeah, what do you think?
Well, you know what I mean. As I said, you know, once I calm down, I think it's extraordinary, right? First of all, it's so witty, right? To A, do it as a comedy, and B, to kind of maintain a particular kind of tone amongst all. I mean, there's great comedians, there's great comic actors, right? Steve Buscemi, Simon Russell Beale, and a lot of others that I can't recall the names right now. But to maintain...
I can list them up for you if you like.
Yeah,
Jeffrey Tambor, Michael Palin, Paddy Considine, Paul Whitehouse, full of them.
Fantastic cast, right? And it's all done with like a very light touch, really. You know, so on the one hand, you have this subject matter, which is really kind of grotesque, right? And on the other hand, you know, it's done with like this incredible, ironic kind of, you know, touch that makes everything seem funny. And it's funny not only in terms of dialogue, but actually in terms of performance and also in terms of camera. Like, you know, this is a real interesting case in terms of, you know, what you were saying a few days ago about, the differences between American comedy and American comedy has lost.
Was I saying this? I don't know.
Yeah, well,
I wasn't talking about American comedy the other day. This is someone else you're thinking of.
No, I'm thinking of you.
Really?
Yes, you were talking about all those Pineapple Express films and films like that, which they're all improvised and kind of they all depend on particular lines to be funny, and actually particularly improv lines usually. And
I think I have. Well, I don't think I was talking about this recently, but I have talked about that kind of thing before.
Yes,
there's just not. Well, what you get in those
so
films,
let me ask you, what is your theory?
Well, it's not a theory so much. It's like, and I'm not the only person to say this, but those films rely heavily. I remember when they made. It may have been Anchorman. It was one of the Judd Apatow films in the sort of mid 2000s, and they bragged. Judd Apatow bragged about how they shot 1 million feet of film.
Yes.
Which is like that's kind of 3-hour-long drama sort of territory. That's a good deal of film to shoot. You don't shoot that on a comedy. And what he was bragging about was we were so full of ideas and we were improvising so much, and it's what you get in the film is lightly edited improvisation. That's not my phrase. That's a phrase by Tony Zhou, who makes a YouTube series called Every Frame Painting. It's great. Lightly edited improv, which is there's no cinematic technique in it because you just have to keep filming in a kind of very general way until someone says something funny. So you don't get kind of camera jokes or visual gags. It's all based on the dialogue. People coming up with a funny line, which they do, but it's like you end up with this kind of half a film. And there is a certain element of that in Armando Iannucci's stuff as well, because they heavily improvise a lot of it, and a lot of it is about kind of just trying to fit in the cameras around the performers and snatching the shots where they can. But they are more planned than that. They work harder on it. They do actually build a script out of what they make.
This is a lot of visual gags.
There are visual
really
gags
brilliant ones, actually.
And this film in particular is actually more, I'd say, kind of visually designed or visually prepared than his other stuff, which is, The Thick of It and In the Loop and Veep are all set in offices, basically. They're set in offices and they're kind of reasonably bland, sort of quite simple sets for the most part. In this, it's a period film. Amongst other things, so they've had to put an awful lot of work into designing these sets and costumes and everything, and so there's an element of visual design which is more sort of, I don't know, prepared maybe.
It's not just period; it's almost iconographically so, right? Like people would be familiar with these images, with the parades through the Kremlin, with the look of Moscow, or the look of the Central Committee overlooking those huge parades of tanks, right? Like, even if you're not old enough to have seen the newspapers of the period or whatever, you've seen that kind of imagery, like through films and so on. It's iconographic, so it has to be reproduced. And I think one of the things that the film should be credited for is to reproduce it so economically and kind of in such a funny manner. Yeah, like it does kind of make jokes of the whole thing, really.
Yeah. And who knows? Oh, actually, who knows what the budget is? I wonder if there's any information on that. But it looks fantastic.
It looks fantastic.
It looks incredibly fantastic and convincing. No matter how much money they spent on it, I don't know. But there are certain shots as well there, because it's not just. Although it does. A lot of it is set in meeting rooms and offices and that sort of thing. Still, with just a bunch of characters in a scene, sort of standing around. There are these scenes where. There are more orchestrated scenes where they've had, looks like thousands of extras, sort of all mourning the death of Stalin, or climbing off trains and getting shot. Like that's that's proper filmmaking, if you like.
Yes, I think there's a couple of things that I want to say that in a way, well, one is around the film. So following on from The Snowman from last week, one of the things that I noticed that I find interesting is, again, to me, this is an example of a kind of a European film. Yeah, it's based on a comic book. It's made with Belgian, French, UK money. Yeah, the cast is largely UK, with a couple of American semi-stars. Yeah, Rupert Friend, who's wonderful.
He's English.
Oh, is he English?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there you go. So only Steve Buscemi and Jeffrey Tambor from Transparent, who's wonderful. American actors brought in, and they meld very, incredibly well actually with the rest of the cast.
Well, what it does that is the same as The Snowman is it sets a film in a non-English speaking country and then just has them speaking English. Yes. So that's just you just buy it. You go. Yeah. These guys are Russian, but they're all speaking English.
Yes. The other thing that I wanted to kind of pick on really is, the theme subject matter, because in a way what it takes is this historical incident, and then it shows the cravenness, the cowardice, the search for power, the willingness to do everything to kind of maintain power, the disregard for life and ideas,
the competition,
structures, the competitiveness, and actually I think kind of in a way it lends itself very, very easily to read a contemporary situation in both Britain, and the US, where you have all of these cowardly, craven politicians saying things they don't believe, acting on things that they don't believe, merely as a way of maintaining power, and kind of elucidates that through laughter.
How familiar are you with Armando Iannucci's other work in
Not
the past
at all.
10 or 15 years? Because I watched about a season and a half of Veep, but In the Loop is the same thing. It's about this crazy rush to war where no one really knows what they're doing, and it's just ad hoc and people fighting each other. And the thick of it is full of it. I mean, the thick of it is you've got to watch it. It's amazing.
I've seen all of Veep, so if he's done that, I have seen Veep.
Well, So I think he left Veep a season or two ago, but the first couple of seasons were him. And also he set up the tone and the style and everything. But basically, the common thread that runs through it all is that despite what they try and show you on the surface, politics underneath is everything that you said. It's competitive and it's craven and it's unplanned and people don't really know what they're doing. And I think that this film is maybe the kind of the furthest extension of that, because you kind of know that British and American politics are, ad hoc and improvised, and people are constantly sort of fucking things up, basically. You kind of know that about modern British and American politics, but the way that a regime like the USSR presented itself, or tried to present itself, was as this monolith, this block that everything was perfect, and not perfect, but they kind of, it was this kind of immovable block of power, and you couldn't. There were no problems. Everyone thought the same thing. There are references in the film to this kind of Michael Palin's character, Molotov in particular, talks about what Stalin would have wanted, everyone working together in the committee and so on. That's how it tried to present itself. And so to show the Stalinist regime and the people behind it in exactly the same way that he presents modern US and UK politicians, it kind of everyone just ends up being the same. This is a continuation of the same themes. Nothing is planned really. Everyone is just trying to fight for their own power and selfishness.
The bit with Michael Palin where he gives that speech that you're referring to is a tour de force, because he begins kind of the speech and then they all agree with him, and then he says the contrary, and they all back off from agreeing.
Yeah, says, what is the stronger thing to do? This would be the strongest thing to do. And so everyone kind of puts their hands up to agree to vote with him, and then he goes, but this would be even stronger. They put their hands up, and he keeps on going back and forth and back and forth. He's like, no, but this would be stronger. And they're like, I don't know what to agree with now.
Yes, and he gets a laugh out of each. The film gets a laugh out of each.
He's
moment,
fantastic, Palin. In
yeah,
this. He hasn't been anything for a while, and it's so good to see him again.
I think everyone's fantastic in this. I loved Andrea Riseborough. Yeah, Stalin's daughter.
Oh yeah, yes.
She's
Svetlana.
She's very good and she's very funny. I love Rupert Friend in this. Simon Russell Beale is like a tour de force, I think, of acting. Like he's very light. He kind of does the most extraordinary things. He makes a joke out of just intonation, right? So when he repeats the stuttering of the guard, right?
Yeah. But his character, it also helps that his character is sarcastic and taking the piss out of everybody, so it helps him to get laughs. Yes. It's in his character's nature.
Yeah, but the actor gets them. I mean, he's brilliant, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is something to see, this incredible group of actors kind of working on this material. It's just...
I mean, it is, in some respects, it is the best version of that kind of Judd Apatow type of filmmaking, which is not to say that it's very much like those films, but in terms of...
It's nothing like those films.
No, it's not. but in the most basic sense, it is a case of getting a group of actors in a scene and just having them play off each other, and not doing very much with the camera to accentuate that. There are moments where it makes visual gags and uses the camera and so on, and set and that sort of thing to make gags. But a lot of the time, it is still just people in a room talking.
Yes.
And it is a joy just to watch these people doing such a great job, interacting so freely. When Jason Isaacs comes in and just starts fucking taking the piss out of everyone and being aggressive and from Yorkshire, fantastic.
Yes.
He steals every scene he's in.
I think one of the things that's worth pointing out is that often those scenes are kept in kind of medium long shots. So actually that you do see all of the characters, all of the actors interacting with each other as they play those characters.
It doesn't shortchange you.
Yeah.
It shows you what you want to see, and it's just very pleasant, sort of to see it.
So, a very witty, very sophisticated, and I think a very pointed film, which is a critique not only of the historical events depicted, but actually a very sharp critique of the world we live in now.
Go on.
That's all I wanted to say.
Well, how does it critique the world that we live in now?
Well, by kind of drawing parallels with what the film is depicting. I mean, it is kind of extraordinary that nobody believes anything, right? And that would be bad enough, right? But nobody believes anything in a very murderous way. They think nothing of, shooting people left and right. Actually, every time that there's a shift in power, all of these people die just by kind of being associated with the previous ones, right? So, everyone's out for themselves. They just don't want to be caught, right? They're willing to do anything not to be caught and to maintain their position and to rise, right? So kind of when you look at what the current government is doing, which actually was described just in The Guardian, as a bunch of public school boys, having an argument and bringing the nation to the brink, as a result of their own individual pursuit of power, you can see the parallels with this, very easily.
I think that's very true. What I would say is actually in that respect, I think it has... on the one hand, you could say it has something in common. On the other hand, you could say that it's retreading the same ground as Iannucci's previous work, because particularly if you're watching The Loop, which you must do, and I'll show it you, that film is about, as I say, this kind of mad march war. It's essentially about the march to war in Iraq, although it's not said as such, and no one plays a real person in it, so it's all fictional. But it's essentially about how these two countries, the US and the UK, end up going to war essentially over nothing, over a kind of a misstatement and just kind of conflicting personalities and so on and so forth. In that respect, the Death of Stalin really does kind of tread the same ground. It says very much the same things, which I guess I was slightly disappointed by. I didn't know what to expect from it because I had no idea. I'd heard he made the film about the Death of Stalin. Brilliant! I'm going to go see it because I love Armando Iannucci. It wasn't a laugh riot. It's not his funniest film. It's not his funniest piece of work.
I found it very funny.
It has its dramatic moments, and there's more darkness behind it because people die, and people can die sort of at any moment, which is not something that happens in his other work.
The film is full of threat.
Yes.
Right. People are being viciously tortured. People are being sexually abused. There's
a shot of the girl in a cage.
Yes.
Or in a prison cell.
Yes.
And what's his name? Beria, Simon Russell Beale's character. There's a bottle of wine and a couple of glasses, and he brings her flowers, and it's like the most twisted version of something romantic.
Yes, exactly. So it's all played for laughs. It's not meant to scare you and so on, but that it's. The threat is it's the comedy's coming from a dark place.
Yes,
right. So and it's done very lightly, but the darkness is there, which I think is actually one of the things that the film is really quite brilliant at doing.
It does have a very precise command of tone, but like I say, it's not afraid to become quite dark in a way that, as I say, I think a way that is about as dark as Iannucci's work has been before. because there are times where it does forego jokes. I mean, in his previous work, like I say, in the Loop, absolutely everything was a joke.
Okay, so
there are times in this where the jokes are forgone.
Where mention?
For instance, like when Beria goes to visit the girl in the cell, like that was put in not to be funny. It's kind of darkly funny, the way it's set up that he brings flowers, but it's ironic. It's not going to get a laugh out of you. It's grim as hell. And I suppose, like I say, the way that, as you say, threat is around every corner and death shows up at every time. Like the way that people die in it is not always played for laughs. It's not to say that it's necessarily played for drama all the time, but it's not entirely light-hearted. I think that people.
What I thought was
it takes the subject matter seriously enough. It's not flippant, you know what I mean?
One of the things that I thought was so resonant of today, and particularly the Trump presidency, was how everything is fake news. There are no facts. Everything is relative. People are willing to change their opinions on a dime, right? Like, whoever's in power, it's like you're willing to think whatever they say, in order, there's fear as well, in order, A, not to be shot, and B, to get more power. There was a particularly resonant scene where, is it Molotov, Michael Palin, the Michael Palin character?
Yes.
Where his wife so Stalin dies, his wife is returned to him, from prison, very battered, and obviously after many years of torture, and she arrives home, and he doesn't know quite how to receive her, right? So what has changed? What should he think now?
The moments before she's returned to him, he and Steve Buscemi, Khrushchev, have been talking to each other about how pleased they are that she's dead and she was betraying the party and so on and so forth. And then she comes back in the room and it all changes and they don't quite know what they're meant to say now.
Yes.
So it's all under the watchful eye of Beria.
That's right.
Who's kind of in charge at this point, really.
That's right. So kind of every conversation becomes loaded, every use of word becomes loaded, and it becomes loaded because nothing is anchored, right? Everything is relative. And everything can bend in relation to power. There is no truth, there's just power. Okay, any last words?
Any last words? I mean, I'm slightly disappointed that it wasn't as funny as it's pretty. I mean, all I can remember is when I went to see In the Loop at the Warwick Arts Centre. That came out in 2009. That was with a full audience, and I've never been in a cinema that laughed so much. That wasn't the case with this. There were laughs around the cinema, but it wasn't that full, and it's not as funny a film. But that's just one of those things, I mean, it's a different type of film.
I think it's brilliant.
It is. It is very good.
I mean, I think it's daring. I think the subject matter is very daring, really. I think it's brilliantly done. I think it's an extraordinary achievement, in terms of the maintenance of that particular tone, which is both dark and cutting and funny, and made possible by some of the finest actors in the English language, conveying and maintaining this ironic tone that permits them to get laughs out of this very dark material. I think it's an incredible tour de force of a film, and I do think it's very funny. I mean, obviously, I can't compare whether it's funny or not funny,
no, sure.
And so many of those things, depend on so many factors. But I think on its own, it's a tour de force.
No, fair enough. I mean, those were big words. I think it. I mean, yeah, tour de force for me would be putting it quite strongly, but I think it's a sort of uncommonly good, and I suppose there's no way that any scene could sort of be improved. Like, it is the most perfect version of itself. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no flaws.
Okay.
Right.
So
no, but I mean, that's not to say.
You're so English and measured. Tour de force is quite strong, but nothing can be improved.
But it's like but also what I'm getting at is that I wasn't kind of rolling around with laughter, which but then who knows whether you should be or not. I mean,
yes.
To be fair, all I see on Twitter is fucking people retweeting, "Oh, the funniest film I've ever seen," blah blah blah. It's like, I just have to turn off Twitter when that happens because people just fucking say things.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I haven't.
People just say, "Oh, it's the funniest thing ever." It's like, oh, it's not, is it? Come on, I mean, it's good. It's really good, but this isn't Airplane.
Yeah. Anyway, let's leave.
It's good. It's a good film.
Let's leave it there.
I'm glad they made it, but I want to see the robot one next because basically for the last since 2004 or 5 or so, since the thick of it started, Iannucci's been doing various versions of this kind of aggressive, sweary political comedy of people fucking things up and being angry at each other and so on and so forth. And it would be nice to see him take a break from that and do the robot thing.
Okay. Well, you know what I want to do? What this made me very much want to do? Actually, it made me want to see it again because I'm so resentful of that, that fucking carelessness with the focus at the beginning of the screening.
Yes.
And B, it very much made me want to read these comic books. Actually, I'm very eager to see
graphic novel.
Graphic novel. Yeah.
It would be,
I want to see what material they were working with to come up with this. Actually.
It's been translated from the French original "La mort de Stalin." Who knows what that means?
Well,
it's
I want to
dead language.
Okay. On that note, let's end it here.
Jolly good.